Welcome and or welcome back to my channel. Sorry I haven't made a video in a while. Not really even sorry to you, mostly sorry to me because there was a bunch of stuff I wanted to make and a schedule that I wanted to keep to. But then some life things happened, some things got in the way, some things didn't get in the way. Maybe I'll talk about that later, maybe I won't. Today you'll notice I'm not in my usual setup. We're in OBS Streamlabs mode with the webcam. This picture is from the original Pokemon movie because AI is making it surprisingly difficult to find Pokemon wallpapers that aren't AI generated and actually look normal. And there are so many things that I found that I was like, this isn't AI generated. And then you look at a window and the window's messed up and you're like, oh no, an actual artist did this. And that's why the AI can do it. Like, it's very frustrating. That's my little rant. Today's video is inspired by one that Tamahiro made very recently called Feral Woman Shows You Her Pokemon Teams for 2 hours Straight. She has been like a long-standing Pokemon fan forever and has also been like a fixture in the online Pokemon community. I'm sure you've probably heard of her if you're watching me, but go check out her video. It's honestly really cool and informative, especially if you're interested in hearing about a lot of the content in the side games, because Pokemon has so many games per generation, especially back in the day, that were all linked together in interesting ways. And her video outlines some of the challenges in playing those older games. But I wanted to do something similar where I show you my Pokemon teams because I have a document that I've been maintaining for at least 10 years. Hang on. Scene change. Whoa. So smooth. So crazy. I need to move myself out of the way. I don't know if this is going to look good in the final product, but if it doesn't, I guess that's okay and I'll have to live with that. This is like an ugly work in progress document. We'll zoom all the way out just so we have the full effect. This is it at 100%. We have some work in progress stuff here. I used to be like a pixel art deviant artist. This is kind of a spoiler, but yeah, I used to like post edits. I used to do Digimon Fusion edits. Cringe compilation. I was a child, let me live. But yeah, I used to be big into like photo editing as well. You might be curious as to why this background is gray. And if you were deep in the trenches with Microsoft Paint, then you know MS Paint used to have a secret transparent select feature that no longer exists, at least not the same way it used to. But they didn't really tell you anywhere that you could do it. But basically, if you had the background color selected, you could left click on something and move it as though it were a transparent image, even if it had a background. So the reason why this document is like a very ugly kind of gray color is that there's a significantly smaller chance of the sprite artists and Pokemon designers using this specific shade of gray as opposed to just like classic white in their sprites. Because then if you transparent select an image that's white, like this Pachirisu, you know what I mean? It's not going to carry the white color with it. That's going to get left behind as well. If I was like more into Photoshop at a certain age back then and understood like making pixel art in that software, maybe I wouldn't have chosen this route, but this is what we're doing today, and I hope you like it. This is mostly going to be like a yap video. I don't have a lot to say about Pokemon as like a game necessarily. There are people who are very, very good at it and that are more qualified to talk about that minutia than I am. A lot of these teams are mostly just for fun, but you'll see as we go, I up the ante. We're going to start off with my first Pokemon game ever, which was Pokemon Pearl. I talked about this when I covered the Gen 4 remakes. My initial copy of Pokemon Pearl was a bootleg. It wasn't real. You could play up to around the 4th gym badge and then you got locked because there was no more content because it was a fake copy. So I wasn't able to finish that game. Also, this is a redo of my technical first team because what I did was I ended up acquiring a new copy, probably of Platinum, and then I gave my bootleg copy to a kid that I used to go to like a after school care with. I didn't tell him that it was a hacked copy. He was like 6. I was like, I don't know, maybe 8 years old. I was pretty young. In my first playthrough, I chose Turtwig. And then on my current copy, that is probably the one I still have, it's a PAL region copy, which is crazy. I used to live in Scotland. That's deep lore. That doesn't really come up that often. Again, because I lived there when I was quite young. So I started a new save where I chose Infernape. And then I made him play the start of the game up until like the first gym badge, I think, because that's when you were able to trade. You couldn't do it right away. So I made him play the first little chunk of the game, or I did it for him. And then I was like, here, take my copy. And then I made him trade over the Turtwig. And then I was like, you can restart it. This initial team here was my first one. I used it for a long time, but it had an Infernape instead of a Glade. I also used this team in Pokemon Battle Revolution, which is like the Gen 4 equivalent to Pokemon Stadium, but not as good, question mark. The animations and the visuals of that game are actually quite nice, but sadly, I don't have a copy anymore. I also don't have a Wii. So I have no means of putting a team like this back onto the game. Many years later, I decided that I wanted to play each of the games with each starter at least once. So I did end up going back and replaying. I'm pretty sure it was Platinum for this run too. I don't think I would have played Diamond or Pearl because I think those games are significantly worse. And I'd never used a Gallade before, so I subbed out Infernape for Gallade so that I could later go on and have my own Infernape team. I don't remember when I did that run. It was sometime in university, whereas this, I was like elementary, middle school age when I initially played. This is like an updated version of my first ever Pokemon team, which is very exciting. I used Pachirisu before it was cool. I didn't really know much about playing the game outside of just using attacking type moves, especially during this run. When replaying the game much later as an adult, I paid way more attention to status moves. Like, as a child, I was not running Hypnosis on Gengar. I was not using Charm on Pachirisu. I just wanted them to have as many electric attacks as possible. So yeah, it didn't end up being until way later that I actually appreciated the nuance and the complexities of the franchise. But this is my first team ever. And we are going to go in chronological order because Gen 4 was my first. And then we're going to start bouncing back and forth once I really started this completionist thing of wanting to play each game with at least one starter. This was my actual team from my first copy of Platinum. Maybe I did have a copy of Diamond where this team came from, because I know I did these in tandem with each other, or I just reset and didn't like this team in the end. Both could be true. When I actually think about Gen 4 as a child, this is the team that I remember. This is the team I used in Platinum. This is a tangent, but I thought I lost this picture too, which was really stressful. I backed up so much stuff from the laptop that this was on, like things that didn't even matter. Like I just backed up everything, but for whatever reason, this picture didn't save. So I got kind of stressed that I wouldn't be able to get it back. I still have that laptop because I don't get rid of technology. Not for anything in particular. I just get stressed about disposing of electronics properly. And I was also worried in the event like this that maybe there's something on that laptop that I may need in the future for whatever reason. That laptop also has like all of my university stuff on it, so I had to keep it for a while, even after I got my current laptop that I use regularly. That is all a PSA to say, save your data, back up your data. Ideally, back up your data in 2 different spots physically, if you can, because sometimes digital, not enough. But yeah, this is the team I remember using. I also used this team on Pokemon Battle Revolution. This team, not very good. Empoleon's a good Pokemon. Roserade's okay if you're playing right. This Gastrodon I mostly used for HMs, but this Togekiss wasn't doing much. Rapidash isn't a great Pokemon. Physical fire type Pokemon, especially early on, aren't really doing much, but I have a lot of nostalgia for this team. I didn't even use Gastrodon that much though. I used Giratina. Gastrodon got benched. But in these 2 teams, you'll also notice a distinct trend that I catch early game Pokemon and then that's it. Like if it's a late game addition to the team, I tend to not do it, especially in a lot of these early runs where I was playing as a child. It's honestly shocking to me that I used a Pachirisu on this team because I don't find single stage Pokemon that interesting. Like there's no payoff because they don't evolve. We have several more Gen 4 teams to talk about, but for now, we take a trip over to Gen 2, and this is the Heart Gold Soul Silver era. What's interesting about this team is that I played the whole game in French because I bought my copy of Soul Silver used, so it's not completely outside of the realm of possibility that I would get a French copy of the game. And thankfully, at this time, my French was okay enough to play because it's for children and the reading level isn't that incredibly high. It is viable. If you want to like dabble in learning a new language, you'll probably have to Google a lot of things, but you'll pick up some language along the way. I have very little recollection of using this team outside of Typhlosion, Dugong, and Ampharos. I feel like I had a team that I used to beat the Elite Four, and then I had this team going into Mount Silver, and I used this team throughout all of Kanto. But like, honestly, I don't remember using a Leafeon during the run. I don't have any recollection of this Machamp. I did use Lugia, so I know I benched one of these 3, like Typhlosion, Ampharos, and Dugong were my mainstays. And I know Lugia was there when I beat Lance. I just don't know. I just don't know which of these Mons got benched, and also why I chose to write them down years ago and include them in this image. I unfortunately don't have that story. Maybe my wires are crossed because I played the game in French, so the memories didn't solidify right. I honestly have no clue. We naturally move on to Heart Gold, Soul Silver's companion game. This game I did play in English. I still have my initial copy of Heart Gold. I did get rid of my Soul Silver copy. Je suis désolé. This was a difficult run because Meganium is not really good in Johto. Grass-type Pokemon in general aren't good in Johto, which is also why I doubt that I used a Leafeon here. What function are you performing? Like, what are you doing? Besides being a gorgeous Pokemon that I had to trade out of Soul Silver because you can't get Leafeon natively. You have to trade into the other Gen 4 games for the Moss Stone. I'm pretty sure I had to steal my little sister's DS and do that. Cyndaquil is my favorite starter, I think, ever, but obviously of this gen too. I really like Chikorita though. It just is a shame that Meganium isn't awesome, especially as a starter, because I don't bench my starters ever. I always try to use them. And if I don't want to use a starter, I'll use a randomizer to make the starter either random, obvi, or whatever Pokemon I want it to be if I haven't used them before. I don't bench my starter. It just feels icky. It feels like it's against the rules. This is a team of like interestingly really great Pokemon and then not at all. Like Starmie is really good. I really like Magnezone. Again, another Pokemon that I had to trade into Platinum because you can't get Magnezone in Heart Gold Soul Silver. But like Flareon, not doing anything. I did replace Flareon with Ho-Oh eventually. And I feel like I was running interesting things on this Mismagius and Ariados, but I don't really know what. Like perhaps a Signal Beam. I feel like I would have used some fun Hex stuff with Mismagius, but I don't really know what they were pulling. And I feel like Starmie and Magnezone were probably putting in a lot of the work. And Ho-Oh too, once I brought them into the fold. We now move on to Pokemon Black. This is, in my opinion, my worst team on this list. I didn't like Pokemon Black. I didn't have a good experience. I'm honestly shocked that I did a team with Pokemon White and I really like this one. I'm getting ahead of myself. But this team has not nice coverage. TBH. I obviously really loved grass type starters when I was young because they were either my first or second choice in playing in any of these gens. Some of these Pokemon are good, but this combination of Pokemon is not awesome together. I feel like I liked Liepard because it can use assist, and for whatever reason, because it's like random and weird, I think it's fun. Crustal's not awful. Stoutland is okay. Stoutland can learn Surf, so I feel like that was my justification for keeping it on the team. Musharner's not bad. Vanillux isn't bad. This is not an all-stars team. Like, this is not a team of winners. I don't know what I was thinking here. And Black and White aren't necessarily the easiest games. I don't know if I beat the Elite Four with this group, because that's suspicious. Like, maybe I swapped out the Legendary, but I also don't have it recorded that I used the Legendary in this run. I also didn't use the Legendary in White either. Who's to say? This is my White team. I definitely cherish it a lot more than my Black team. Like, Samurot's way better. Lilligant is one of my favorite Pokemon, literally of all time. This Lilligant for sure wasn't own tempo. I did not have the facilities to run own tempo Lilligant. However, I'm replaying White, and I think I'm gonna do own tempo Lilligant because that Pokemon is so fun to use. This Klinglang also wasn't really putting in work. I feel like I should have just had an electric type to do what I wanted it to do because I just had it using electric type moves, but it's not an electric type, so it doesn't get any bonus. I don't know, maybe I just thought it looked cool. I also switched back and forth between using a Klinglang here and using Reuniclus, but I ended up using Klinglang in the Elite Four. Which is also wild because I feel like, why didn't I bring Reuniclus? Maybe Unpheasant was doing the work. Who can ever be sure? Oh my gosh, now we move on to Black 2, and spoiler alert, this is my favorite team of all time. This is my favorite team I've ever used. My Black 2 run is probably my favorite experience I've ever had playing a Pokemon game. I think they're just the best Pokemon games. Gen 4 is my favorite, and I think Gen 2 has a lot going for it thematically and aesthetically, but something about Black 2, White 2, especially coming off the heels of Black and White, which I felt were underwhelming. I just thought the games were so good. I fell in love with the world in those games. I appreciated that they brought back a lot of early gen Pokemon because Gen 5 was really like a soft reboot for the series. They redid a lot of Pokemon that already exist. I feel like you can look at almost every single Pokemon in the Gen 5 decks and find a parallel in previous gens as to what they were going for. So this was really fun to have a mix of a team, and all of these Pokemon are pretty... Actually, honestly, this Altaria had a bad move set. I think my Zoroark did too, but these ones in the front were really, really great. I did a lot of the post game. I didn't get any of these Pokemon up to level 100. I probably did like high 80s, but I played this game for so long. It was one of the only ones where I like seriously was going to fill out the Pokedex. I got so into this game that I ended up doing a secondary team with, let's see, I don't have it pictured because I didn't actually beat the game with it. I guess these are just Pokemon that I was all really obsessed with and thought worked together, but Wigglytuff, Lopunny, Umbreon, Muck, Magmortar, and Serperior. That was like my secondary team. the team that I moonlighted with, and I just wanted to play with them. I don't know what. I loved this game so, so much. Also, Error 404, Image Not Found, is my team from White 2, because at that point I had run out of starters. So I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to repeat. So that's when I learned. I didn't learn how to hack. Sorry that I wasn't a hacker in middle school. You'll have to forgive me. Dislike the video. I downloaded an app, and the app I think would let you Wi-Fi gift Pokemon that you made in the app to your game. So I did a challenge run of White 2 with all water type Pokemon, and I tried to do some digging. I wiped the dust off my iPad. I could not find this team for the life of me. I've done some reverse engineering, and I think it was Kingdra, Sharpedo, Poliwrath, Swanna, Seismitoad, and Caracosta, maybe, but I also really like Ludicolo, so I feel like I would have, maybe one of those could be swapped out for Ludicolo. That's like my short list of like 7 or 8 Pokemon that I think I would have used on the team, and I worked really hard to try and find this team. Like, I still have the app. The app doesn't have it saved. I didn't have it written in a notes file anywhere. I might have it written in a secret Word document somewhere that I don't know that I wrote it down in. Maybe I'll uncover a Word document way later that has that information and that planning, but right now I can only speculate. But what was a fun treat is that I plugged in my copy of White 2 again, and I started doing the same concept a second time, but it was with all grass type Pokemon. That save file is still live. Like, I could continue that run. So that was like a nice surprise. This has been such an interesting walk down digital memory lane for me, just because it's wild. Like, this is what I was up to in middle school. Adult me could barely even think of it. The current team right now in my all grass type run is Lombre, Ferroseed, Execute, Shroomish, Cacnea, and Snover. And I also had teams planned out for all fire, all ice, all psychic. Maybe it was just those 3, but I loved Black and White 2 so much that I was going to replay the games over and over again with hacked Pokemon. And I have like movesets planned and what they would need too. Like, I was in my research bag. Sorry, that's not pictured. One of them I don't remember, and the other one I didn't actually finish the run. Now we get into Gen 6. Some of these I did a very, very long time ago, so I don't know who actually made the sprites. Like I mentioned, I probably have had this image file for at least the better part of 10 years, so it wasn't necessarily on my mind to take credit because I never thought this would be public. If you recognize who made this Talonflame and who made this protagonist sprite, feel free to drop it down below. I just don't have that information with me, so I apologize for my 14-year-old negligence. I feel like this game still came out when I was in middle school. When did X and Y come out? How old am I? 2013. Oh, I just started high school. I think they're my least favorite of the games. Gen 6 and then Gen 8, I think, are tied. I really don't like them. However, I love Mega Evolution. That's the only thing that Gen 6 has going for it, is that Mega Evolution is my favorite gimmick that they've ever done. I would welcome it back, honestly, with open, loving arms. I would be so grateful. I would say thank you. I would say thank you every single day to the Pokemon Company because Mega Evolution was so fun. And obviously, I feel like you can tell from this team comp that I didn't even care about Gen 6. I wonder if this Lucario is the gift one. I was not spoiled for the final evolutions of these starters, and you'll probably remember back in the day, I think there was a pretty famous leak as to how they were going to look. A lot of people were speculating that the Fennekin final evolution was going to be a quadrupedal fox, kind of like Ninetales, but it was going to be psychic type. So everything we could ever want. And then that didn't happen. The furries won. That's not to say I dislike Delphox or even Braixen. I think they're a cool concept, and I like that the final 3 starters have a secondary type advantage against each other, and they also have this wizard, knight, rogue class theme, which I think is really cool. Bonus points for all of that. I don't know why I didn't choose Blastoise, TBH, because I love Squirtle too, but maybe I just thought this felt more correct. Also worth noting that I did bench Snorlax for Xerneas, and this Lucario is the first and I think only Pokemon that I've ever trained to level 100. I think Xerneas I got really close, like 98, 99. I was up there, but I didn't finish it. And again, I was trying to complete the Pokedex. In every single one of these games, I've deluded myself into thinking that I can finish the Pokedex when it's simply out of scope for me and I just get bored. Maybe one of these days, I'll be a famous streamer and that'll be my job, but who can ever be sure? I also love the way that Mega Evolution made Pokemon that weren't very interesting really cool again. Like Absol has always been, at least lore-wise and design-wise, a cool Pokemon. Not necessarily the most useful, but having a Mega Form upped the ante for Absol. More people were going to use it. For the first time at launch, I did not buy both games either at the same time or in quick succession. of one another. I did not buy Y for, I think, a really long time. Now we jump back to the Gen 3 remakes, which were part of this console era on the 3DS for Pokemon. Like, Gen 3 was so huge. I really liked the anime. I just never had a Game Boy or anything. I did have Pokemon XD, which is technically a third gen game, but otherwise I didn't really have any connection to the gen as games. And I quite liked Alpha Sapphire. Again, I didn't buy the second game. I've never played Omega Ruby. I've never owned a copy of it. Anywho, this is the team that I used. All of the Gen 3 starters are really cool, but Swampert was really the one that I wanted to use. I also love Gardevoir, obsessed that they gave it a Mega. So this was a treat for me personally. Also, like the Pikachu costumes, having a Pikachu with an ice type move, there was something about it that was like so busted, but also so useful. I was thriving. I was having such a wonderful time. This was a fun team. I didn't love this game, especially, but it was fun. I think I also did try to complete the Pokedex and do some like Dexnav shiny hunting. Is the Dexnav what it's even called? It was like frustrating and not very easy, but I did try. Now we head on over to Gen 7. Again, we're in a new generation of Pokemon. These are the last of the 3DS games and handheld games in general. I think, again, I wasn't spoiled on the final forms of the starters, and I really was hoping that it would be a quadrupedal fire type. I don't know why I was so desperate for that. And then it didn't happen. It was more furry bait, which again, I feel like I've talked about furries on this channel. I don't really care what you do. I think being a furry is fine. Honestly, the people in the furry art community, some of them, extremely talented and dedicated to the craft. And I have to respect that. There's something about this team that I don't like, and I don't know what it is. I feel like Gyarados and Crobat are weirdly out of place here, which is funny because I know I just complimented Black and White 2 in reincorporating older generations well. Maybe that team just had a nicer visual symmetry. I don't know. I feel like Crobat and Gyarados here don't make sense, but they certainly are great Pokemon. Initially, when I was doing this is my first instance where I was like really trying with a different team and then I had to bench them because it just wasn't working. Slowbro is one of my favorite Pokemon of all time, and I really wanted to use it. And I was also using Vikavolt, the region's bug electric type Pokemon, because it's also very cool. But Slowbro was just flopping. And then I guess I chose Gyarados to replace it. It just seems so basic. Like, it doesn't belong on this team. You know what I mean? But I'm glad I got to use Alolan Raichu. That ended up being the trade-off, was that I took Vikavolt and Slowbro off, and then I brought in Alolan Raichu and Gyarados. And I also used Como, which is another super late game Pokemon. I'm growing and evolving in my tastes. I was willing to bench Pokemon that I was using for almost the whole game because they just weren't working. But now we're going to flip back over to Gen 1, Fire Red, Leaf Green. This is my Leaf Green team. And you'll notice that I didn't really do that. There are some early game Mons that I was like, I'm sticking with it. They're going to be with me the whole time. I attempted playing the Gen 1 remakes several times, and for some reason there was a disconnect. I just like was never able to get into them. But then I was playing this game during a university lecture. The girlies with ADHD who don't like econ get it. Sometimes you get all the information at home and you don't actually need to go to the lecture. You just need to read the book. That's my defense. I don't know what clicked for me at some point in this game, but I was like, oh, I get it. I loved the charm. I do think Pokemon loses some of its aesthetic rules along the way, especially once we look at Gen 6 and Gen 7. They have evolved, and there's a certain simplicity in these early designs and just general aesthetic and biological through lines that just make sense, for lack of a better term. But I think like so many combinations of Gen 1 Pokemon just look really good together. Sorry, I'm spoiling. I'm getting ahead of myself. I really wanted to use Squirtle. This is just like a team of Pokemon that I either really wanted to use or I fell in love with on the way. Like Jolteon continues me wanting to use all of the evolutions. Mr. Mime and Hitmonchan, I feel like weren't on my radar as Pokemon ever, but I loved them both so much during this run. Neither of them are the greatest Pokemon, but it was so satisfying to have Hitmonchan use all of the elemental punches and be kind of successful at that. Like, it's crazy to be up against Lance's Dragonite and use Ice Punch. It didn't work. It didn't kill. It definitely took 2 shots, or maybe Hitmonchan died, but I was having fun. I was thriving. Okay, now we bounce back to playing a game that was actually on a console and not emulated on my computer. Don't tell Daddy Nintendo I said that. This is now Ultra Sun and eventually Ultra Moon. This team, I think, has the exact same issues as this team in terms of the look. There's something that doesn't fit about the previous gen Pokemon that I picked. Like, I don't think all of these Pokemon look good together, right? Like, there's a beach theme, there's like a high femme fun theme, but then Vikavolt and Tyranitar look like they're at the wrong party. I know this team worked out really well. Like, I'm looking at the type combinations, I'm looking at the material, and what I'm seeing makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm pretty sure all of these Pokemon, except for Lopunny, like, the other 5 were so good, at least typing wise on their own, that I was actually able to use a Pokemon primarily for fun and not to like cover any sort of deficiency on my team. Like, I think that's part of what happened, is that like Tyranitar was just so useful that I was like, oh my gosh, I can totally use a Lopunny, and I've always wanted to. Typing wise, pretty great. But again, it lacks the cohesion. Now we bounce all the way back. We're back on an emulator run. I think what I ended up finding is that the early game Pokemon in the Gen 3 games, like, there's just a distinct lack of variety. So I have a feeling that I did a randomizer run for this team, even though it's not impossible to go into the Elite Four with a team looking like this. I just have a sneaking sense that I didn't do it without a randomizer. Actually, I think that might be why this is all a Gen 3 team too, because there's a fair amount of Gen 2 and Gen 1 Pokemon scattered throughout the region. I think I did a Gen 3 randomizer because I realized I don't like reusing Pokemon. Obviously, I had to let that go at a certain point because eventually there's not going to be many more combinations to use if you don't reuse some of them, especially typing wise. But I think I was like, I avoid using Gen 3 Pokemon. Let's just do a full Gen 3 team. Unpopular opinion, I really don't like Gen 3 as games. They're my least favorite of pre-Gen 5. So they're my least favorite of games that are pretty okay. That's my disclaimer. I think the move to 3D, unfortunately, contributed to Pokemon losing a lot of its identity, but that's a different discussion for another day. Now we bounce back. I was just playing on my computer at this point now. Like, now we're really in emulator era. Also I didn't use a randomizer for this, but I definitely used a randomizer for this run because that's why I have an Alakazam, because you can use the randomizer to change trade only evolutions to level evolutions, and that's the only reason why I have an Alakazam. This team, I don't know if you guys are noticing any similarities. I don't know if you guys are noticing that the type composition is almost exactly the same. And then when we look at my third run team with Venusaur, it's very similar, except the Venusaur is here. I literally did a parallel team. I wanted to relive the joy of this first run and just like do it again. I think that's why I used Nidoking. And I feel like here we have some classic Pokemon like Charizard, Alakazam. This is technically my third time using an iteration of the Pikachu line, but yeah, just classic Pokemon. Also, I'm pretty sure I was going to use Hitmonlee, again, literally just to parallel this team almost exactly. And then this is my first ever shiny encounter. Not even the first shiny Pokemon I've ever caught. I've never seen a shiny Pokemon, but I've played a substantial amount of Pokemon. And the fact that this shiny Mankey was my first ever shiny Pokemon is absolutely crazy. But obviously, I had to use slightly green fists. If you got him, flaunt him. And I was going to use a fighting type Pokemon anyways. This is my first ever shiny Pokemon. Also, I think the only shiny Pokemon that is on any of these lists. Now we move on. This is my Feraligatr team. I played Pokemon Storm Silver, which is a ROM hack. Heart Gold and Soul Silver have a little bit of a balancing issue where just like a lot of the Pokemon and the trainers stay weak, but the gym leaders keep getting stronger. So Storm Silver adds a lot of difficulty while also kind of balancing that level curve. In hindsight, looking at this team, I don't know how I beat the game, because I tried playing Storm Silver again, and that game is quite hard. Maybe this early Glaceon really helped me get through those first couple gyms. I don't really know, because Storm Silver is not easy. Storm Silver is not easy. I tried replaying it with Cyndaquil as my starter, and I'm pretty sure I wanted to use Vaporeon, because that's an evolution that I haven't tried yet. I didn't have a nice time. Like, I struggled. After all this time, I eventually secured a copy of Pokemon Y. I like really barreled through this game. I know I wanted to use Greninja. I know I wanted to use Charizard. Same with Aegislash. Like, those were the mons that I wanted to use. Reuniclus, Florges, and Aurorus. I definitely wanted to use more Gen 6 Pokemon this time around. That was definitely a focus, so you'll notice I exhibited a lot of restraint and let Charizard shine as my only Mega Pokemon. I don't have much memory of this run. I wasn't really playing it for the joy, and it was like a reminder that X and Y are not very good games. They're not very fleshed out. Now we finally get to my Venusaur team. This is another randomizer run, which is why Hariyama is here. Again, I don't really have much to comment on this team. I specifically chose a lot of the same typing stuff. I knew I needed to use a Venusaur. Arcanine is like the only other fire type in Gen 1 that isn't Rapidash, which I've already used. Magmar, which I would have wanted to save for a different run anyways, where I used it as a Magmortar. because I really love Magmortar and Electivire. I kind of glossed over the Electivire and Houndoom here. Very fun Pokemon. But yeah, Arcanine is like the last fire type option, besides like Moltres, but at this point I stopped using legendary Pokemon. I think the only things I wanted to do were use a Bulbasaur and use a Horsea. Horsea is also, again, one of my favorite Pokemon ever. I usually pick a couple of Mons that I want to use very badly and then build out my team around that, and this was certainly that. This is another Platinum run. This is when I replayed with my original team that I made as a child and did the split of Torterra and Infernape and used them on different teams. So I fully replayed this. I know I talked about that already. And then I did a randomizer run. I don't really know the benefits of having this randomized team. I feel like you can get all of these Pokemon except maybe Chinchou. This is just another collection of Pokemon that I really wanted to use. Like Cherim is not an outstanding Pokemon by any means. Lantern has a cool type, but again, not the best Pokemon. They're just cute Pokemon that I wanted to use, but Infernape is really good. My affinity for dual typing is really coming through on this team. This one worked out for Pokemon that I haven't used before that I really wanted to use in a team. Like all of these Pokemon are really fun. I was in such a Pokemon era at this time. Like I'm positive that I was playing all of these runs back to back to back to back. But there's one thing I knew about myself, and it's that I wanted to play White 2 again, and I didn't want to do the Gen 3 games. So instead, I played White 2, and I just used Sceptile as the starter. That was my compromise. And this is also absolutely a randomizer run, because why do I have Metagross, Hydreigon, and Volcarona all on the same team? Like, this is actually crazy. I also love that Golem is just in the front. I feel like it's the most underwhelming Pokemon here, and I have him just front and center. Once again, I had a hankering for Pokemon and I was bored of what the main series were doing, probably. This is a fully randomized run. I had like a hyperfixation on using Rhyhorn as a starter. I can't tell you why. It doesn't make sense to me, but I was like, I'm gonna use Rhyperior. I even like recolored the sprite myself. Not very well, don't look too close. I didn't invent art with this outfit redesign, this color palette swap, I should say. Like, what an interesting orange and green that I selected. I obviously used the orange from here and the green from Dragonite's wings, and I also think I redid the pant color. I think it's a little different when compared to this Lucas, but it's hard to say. Even if it is different, it's a pretty negligible change. This team is like weirdly harmonious to me and weirdly not. Salamence and Rhyperior are buddies. Shiftry and Poliwrath are buddies. Frostless and Vespiquen are buddies. I think it's because they have like similar bodies to each other. Body buddies, what an interesting thing to say. I feel like I could have more artfully composed them in this little circle. This is a weird mix of like, I really want to use these Pokemon and I'm running out of options. I love Frostless. I love Vespiquen. I just hadn't used them. And again, I had a weird fixation on using Rhyperior for whatever reason. So that's why he's here. But then I think Poliwrath, Dragonite, and Shiftry came with the run. Those were not pre-planned. I think I had these three in mind, and then I was like, this will round out the team nicely in terms of Pokemon that I haven't used and also with decent typing. In my Detective Pikachu video, I go off about how I thought Shiftry looked completely different, and I thought this was like body and like lower hip, but this is like Shiftry's chin. Like, this is his whole head, and I didn't know that. I'm pretty sure I played Ultra Moon for this run of the game. What you'll notice with this run is that I was like, I'm going to use only Pokemon from this generation. I don't remember too much about this run, but I think all of these Pokemon were like MVPs, like great type combinations. They were all putting in work. Like even Beware, despite the fact that it's so slow, was fun to use. I love Alolan Ninetales. Decidueye is cool. I feel like I don't always love grass types, especially from a gameplay perspective, but having that ghost type really makes it hit home. Alolan Muck is like really ugly, but also colorful and fun. But I think the star of this run truly was Oricorio. I don't think I really had much use for its ghost and psychic type versions, but I'm pretty sure I was back and forth between electric and fire, and it was just putting in so much work. It was such a good Pokemon. Good morning, I'm back, and it's the next day. Who knew that I was going to talk about Pokemon for 8,000 years, but I love to yap. I love to yap. I am a certified yapper, and this is true. So I like binged Sword and Shield. I got the double pack for both games, and I'm sure it helped that we were in the middle of something a little big. We were in the middle of a big world event that made it easy to play the same Pokemon game 3 times in a row in quick succession. I don't think I have strong feelings about any of these teams. I also there were some of these Pokemon that I got because I didn't understand that Pokemon could both Dynamax and Gigantamax. I thought Pokemon with a Gigantamax form were just going to be able to do that all the time, but you have to catch a special Pokemon that can Gigantamax, which was really frustrating to me. So like I have a bunch of Pokemon in each of these teams that on paper, yes, they can Gigantamax, but the ones I have couldn't. So you just got like a normal Dynamax. And I think Dynamaxing is so lame. Like, why do I want them to be big? I do appreciate the sport theme, but yeah, nothing else going on. Like, I don't have fond memories of this run. The only Pokemon that I care a lot about from this team is probably Galarian Weezing, because I like Weezing a lot. And I think Galarian Weezing, especially having that dual poison fairy typing, is so fun. I like this team a lot. I had to double check to see like which version of Toxtricity I had because I didn't remember. I was also using Galarian Rapidash up until a certain point. That design, I think, could have been so cool, but I do not like the My Little Pony smooth hair reference. I wish it had like a fiery mane the way that Ponyta does. I think they kind of fumbled the bag on that one because that could have been an instant favorite. So I did switch out Rapidash for Hatterene. There's too many Psychic Fairy type Pokemon. They need to get creative. They need to start venturing out and doing different type combinations. That one is just like, we've seen it so many times, especially for these femme mystic Pokemon. Like Gothitelle at least maintained her integrity. It's a lot of Pokemon that I like, and then I think Pangoro in the back here is mostly for type coverage. You'll also notice way more in these later gens that have fairy type Pokemon that I'll use steel or poison type way more. I definitely am more partial to poison type for whatever reason. I think I just like it more because like so many of these teams have a poison type. Yeah, like all 3 of my Sun and Moon teams have a poison type. All 3 of my Sword and Shield teams have a poison type. Special shout out to Frostmoth because that is my favorite mon of this gen. This team I replayed in Sword and I still have this copy with this team. I also transferred all of these Pokemon into this game. Solid run. I have no recollection of it. I'm surprised that I got a Runerigus because the evolve requirements are actually ridiculous. But yeah, I think I mostly just wanted to use Inteleon and Grimmsnarl because they're both really cool. I don't know at what point in my life I played this game. Obviously, it was after blazing through all of the Sword and Shield runs. I remember using this team, but I no longer have a copy of X or Y. So I'm kind of like, when did this happen? I also don't know if I finished the game because I genuinely, I don't like 6th gen. I have no recollection of this run or anything that happened. I don't remember playing this. I know that I did. I just, unfortunately, I don't have anything to offer you. I had to turn my 3DS upside down and everything to get Malamar. And for what? We move on to my last Gen 1 team. And unpopular opinion, I think Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee are incredible. I think they're some of the best Pokemon games, and they need to make one for every gen. They need to do Gen 2 Let's Go so badly. I know people don't like them. I know they're simple. I know they're basic. But I think because they're so easy, they make bad Pokemon more fun to use and a little bit more viable. Like, I don't know if I would ever use a Wigglytuff in Gen 1. I would never use a Butterfree. So I think it just gave me an opportunity to use Pokemon that are a little bit, I guess, on the sillier side. And again, I was able to make a team of Pokemon that I've never used before. And with this team, like, I had 5 Pokemon. This Persian didn't get any action. I didn't have this Persian to actually use in a meaningful way. I just liked the look of riding on a big cat. This Persian was exclusively a ride Pokemon. It was not for anything else. Oh my gosh. I love Gen 4. I've played it so many times. This is my team from Brilliant Diamond. I still have my copy of this game. I did start playing Shining Pearl, but I think I just got bored and I wanted to move on. So I didn't end up finishing that game for whatever reason. Obviously, with some of these members, I'm paying homage to my original Platinum team. I chose to arrange them in the same way because of that too. This is perhaps the first team where I had to hang up my principle of like not reusing Pokemon. I think it just made it so much easier to actually build. Skuntank and Togekiss are fun to use in later generations just because the type chart has changed. So they're useful in different ways, especially compared to back in the day on the original DS. This is my working team for Pokemon Violet. I didn't end up picking up Scarlet at all, so I don't have different team comps to offer you with the other starters. I think the structure of Violet makes it harder to do that just because it's open world. I know it's not that much longer compared to like a normal Pokemon game, but there is like quite a bit to do. And I think I had a lot of fun with this team and I'm just like pretty okay with not replaying. I might pick up a copy of Scarlet eventually just because the open world sensibility speaks to me a little bit more, so I could see myself actually completing the Pokedex in this game. I also want to do the DLC, even though I've heard it's pretty mid. I don't know. I'm a Scarlet and Violet defender, question mark, to an extent, within reason. I know those games were extremely bad on launch. And I haven't touched my copy in a while either. I love this team so much, actually. I know I've like commented on weirdly incongruous body type teams. This one kind of has that going on, but this one has some decent variety, which I think is fun. Actually, maybe not. It's like 2 birds, 2 little standing mammals, Clodsire being perfect, and then Meowscarada being for the furries. But Meowscarada is such a fun Pokemon. Flower Trick, I was so happy with my choice of Sprigatito. What a cute little mon. Espathra is like, I think, my favorite Pokemon of the gen. And I always love using a new generation take on an old Pokemon. That's all I have to say in regards to Pokemon. Thank you for watching. Sorry for the content drought. I'm doing what I can. I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, but I'm trying my best. You enjoyed some of this walk down memory lane with me. I have been playing Pokemon since I was a child, with my first copy of Pearl when I was like less than 10, and now I'm 25, almost 26. If you want to wish me a happy birthday, subscribe. And that's how I get you. And then yeah, tipping options are available down below as well. Okay, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.